Hello and welcome to the PBL Podcast. My name is Ben Songrath, and I'm going to be taking you around today and introducing a little bit about what project-based learning is and how it works. Today we're going to be looking at an American government class and its introduction of a project-based learning unit into that class. I'm going to go step by step on how a project-based learning unit will look like, what the steps the teacher needs to make, both as an overview that would apply to many different disciplines, but then also a specific example of what a unit inside of an American government class would look like. This way, if you don't teach American government, you can still have an idea as to what to look for in a PBL unit and how maybe you can adapt and reform your curriculum to look like it as well. So to get started, I'm going to talk about 6 different steps in the project-based learning curriculum that are necessary for teachers to implement in order for a PBL unit to really succeed. So the first step that a teacher would do in order to create a PBL unit is come up with what's called a driving question. And this driving question is what will guide the students throughout the whole unit. So it's very important that the teacher creates something that the students can go back to and understand what the unit is all about. The question should also be thought-provoking and challenge the students. It should focus the students and frame important issues, challenges, and problems surrounding the topic. So this question should not have a true right or wrong answer and should make the students think deeply about the topic. So it's important for the teacher to understand how big this step is and to get this question to really fit in with what they're looking for in the unit. Now, after the teacher introduces a question, should have the students attempt to respond to it. This could be in any form. You could have the students write the question out, use it as a written activity, have them record their answers using technology, but I would suggest having them write it out because then you're using multiple skills. And with the increase in Common Core and the increase on other disciplines outside of the English language arts to include writing and reading, this would be a good activity to use to get that writing component in that's in the new Common Core standards. After gathering up the written responses from the student, the teacher should reflect on them because it's a great opportunity for you, the teacher, to understand what your students maybe already know on the topic. And if your students know about a little bit more, you see a trend where students know a little bit more about one aspect of the content that you're going to deliver to them during the unit, then you might be able to not spend as much time on that particular topic and move on to something that they're unfamiliar with and a component that they do not know. So that's important to review those answers to those driving questions. And now, as we go along this process, to clarify the steps in the podcast, we're going to form a hypothetical PBL unit. This PBL unit is going to take place in a senior level American government class, as I said earlier. The unit is titled Government by the People and is going to include content that looks at the election process. At the start of the unit, students are going to be given the driving question that asks them to examine the election process. What factors determine the electability of a candidate, and how does a person successfully run a political campaign? I feel like this is a good driving question because there's not really one right answer as to how a person successfully runs a political campaign. There's many right components to running a campaign, but you can ask James Carville or you can ask any other political analyst, and they're going to give you a different answer on the successful way to run a political campaign. And I think that's going to come in play later on in a PBL unit when we look at dealing with experts in the field, because everyone is going to have their own opinion on how a political campaign should be run, which makes it very exciting for the students to kind of come to their own conclusions, which is what we're going to deal with as we get going through this project. So what I would have the students do then is after I give them this question, I would have them write a response. I would expect for them to not have very much knowledge of a campaign up to this point. And so I think the answers would be very interesting to read and really great to judge on the type of content that I would like to focus on as we get further along in the steps. So along those lines, after I introduce the driving question of the unit, the teacher's then going to introduce the culminating challenge. And this is the really fun part of project-based learning, is this culminating challenge that the students will look for. It's important to note that the culminating challenge should also be introduced before instruction has taken place. You should point this out right after you give them the driving question. The challenge will be the project aspect of the unit, and at this point, the students should also be placed into groups, which they are going to work with. Groups are very important in the component aspect of project-based learning, because what we're trying to do in PBL is promote 21st century skills. And one of those big 21st century skills is collaboration and communication. Actually, those are two. And in order to promote this, you need to have the students into groups. The premium group size, from what I've seen and talked to people, is right around 3 students. And in my experience working with kids in doing projects, when they get to 4 and 5, it's too many and people start to get distracted and roles start to be slacked off on. If there's 2, sometimes the task can be overwhelming for only 2 people to handle. 3 seems to be a magic number. Obviously, the size can be adjusted based on your classes, but 3 seems to be the magic number when it comes to group size. Now, it's also up to the teacher to determine if the class should be placed into groups or have the ability to choose who they worked with. There are pros and cons to both. Pros, if you choose the groups, you can make sure that students will be in a group where they will be forced to do something, because we all know that students sometimes will just not do anything if they're put in the wrong group with their friends. But the con of that is that sometimes people might get stuck with people that they don't like, and they will shut down and just not participate at all. If they work with their friends and they are able to choose their groups, you can see an increase in participation because they're friendly, they like each other, they're happy to be with each other. I've also seen a benefit of this where students will be more willing to complete work on the project outside of class because they see it as a chance to go and hang out with one of their friends. I've had many films be made in students' kitchens, in students' yards, on their farms, where there's just really them hanging out and having fun with their classmates, which is kind of a nice idea because it's getting kids outside of school to do schoolwork and have fun and enjoy it. It's truly up to you, the teacher, on if your class is able to handle choosing their own groups or you putting them into it. It's up to your decision on the demographics of the class and the makeups of the students. In this step, the students should also determine what roles they're going to take in the challenge. And each challenge is going to present more than likely a different set of roles. So it's not really easy for me to say there's one universal set of roles that teachers should use for each challenge. Now, for my government unit that we're working through here, I'll give you an example of the types of roles that we use in this unit, and also the example of the type of challenge that the students are going to be dealing with. So remember, our driving question asks them how they could successfully run a political campaign. Well, the challenge for this particular unit is going to be for students in groups to run a campaign for the United States House of Representatives. Now here in northwestern Illinois, our district is District 17, represented by Sherry Bustos. So this is the district the students live in, which is going to give them great access to the types of issues that are involved in this district. Okay, so the challenge is for them to create 3 different things in order to fully use the ideas of a campaign. The first one is a stump speech. So we're going to have one of the students become the candidate. And that person has to go out and research what issues are affecting United States Representatives, Illinois District 17. And then they're going to write a speech as if they were campaigning for that position. The next thing that the students are going to have to do is include a campaign ad. And for this particular unit, I require them to create a political commercial, which have turned out fantastic. The kids really like them, they take off with them, and they really enjoy going after and creating the political commercials. The third step is to create an outline of a campaign strategy, or how they would run their campaign, including a budget, the types of people, the demographics that they're going to target, and the different types of people that they're going to target, how they're going to get their message out, like public appearances or travel or newspapers. What are they going to do to get their message out to the people, and then ultimately culminating with how are they going to win election. So there's 3 different roles here, and I've found that it worked well if one person became the candidate and was in charge of the stump speech, another person was in charge of organizing and directing the campaign ad, and the third person became a de facto campaign manager, creating the outline of the campaign strategy and so on. So it may seem like they have some individual roles. However, the group has to collectively work on this project because each person and each part works with the other. So they maintain responsibility for their role, but the campaign ad cannot succeed if they do not know what the stump speech issues are about. And likewise, the campaign manager will not be able to target certain demographics if they don't know what the candidates' issues that they're supporting are and involve. And so they have to share resources, they have to communicate with each other, and ultimately they have to collaborate with each other to make a successful campaign, which is very much like in real life. They're going to present all the aspects of the campaign to their classmates and their teachers. But also, as we get into later, they also have an opportunity, if the timing is right, to present them to some experts in their field. The presentation is going to include the stump speech by the candidate, the viewing of their campaign ads, and then also a detailed description of their campaign strategies. So that's step 2. So after we've now introduced the driving question and the culminating challenge, it's time to let the students understand what type of content they're going to be exposed to as they go throughout the process of this unit. Once these aspects are introduced to the students, the third step involves actual instruction of the information. And in regards to a PBL unit, this is probably the most traditional aspect, as the students are going to be exposed to content that will be encompassed in the culminating project. It's important for the teacher to take care to engage the students in meaningful activities and spark a desire for the students to want to know more about the topic as they go through this part of the unit. Throughout the step, the students should understand that the information they are collecting will be used in the culminating challenge. So a constant refresher or meeting of the groups for them to organize their thoughts will be important. The length of this step varies because it's going to determine by the amount of content in the unit and what the teacher's objectives for the students to know are, which will vary from topic to topic. So in our mock unit that we're putting together here, the instructional aspect of this unit is going to be a completion of a series of assignments that's going to strengthen the content base of the students and make their project successful. For this series of assignments, it's going to include the following aspects of government by the people. The students will complete vocabulary on political parties and elections. They will also do an assignment on the history of political parties to understand the background knowledge and where political parties come from. They will then research the stances that current political parties have on various issues. We're also going to look at how the media influences elections via conservative and liberal sites, all forms of media, be it TV, internet, newspapers, magazines, and so on. We'll look at political ads and how they can affect the voters. And then ultimately we'll look at the election process and the electoral process. It's important to see, for the students to see that not only the president runs for office, but also that all of the minor offices that are involved, all the way down to the smallest form of government, which would be like the school board. These activities are going to create a foundation of knowledge for the students, so that way when they're creating their own campaigns, they can go back to these assignments and go back to this content and understand where their issues are coming from, who they're trying to target, and that type of thing. It's also going to give them a great opportunity to have a list of resources for them to use while completing their challenge. The various websites that they'll use and text information that they'll use throughout completing these assignments will be a great resource for them to go back on and use when they're designing their own campaigns and figuring out how to approach the people of the district. So once the instruction is done, the next step is the most fun part if you're a teacher, because you get to see it all come alive. And that's the completion of the culminating challenge or the project. And so now they're going to apply the content knowledge that they've learned over the last few weeks into the culminating project. At this point, the students should have a direction on what the teacher is looking for in a project type. So it's important for the teacher to understand that they want a book, or they want a presentation, or they want a video or a podcast like what we're doing right now. There are an unbelievable amount of project types out there for teachers to use. And actually, the last part of this podcast, I'm going to go into quite a few different ones and give you some examples of what a teacher can use to create this culminating challenge for the students and really engage them. Now, one of the great things about PBL, and this takes project-based learning to another level and takes it away from just the typical project aspect of a classroom, is the use of experts in the field for the students to really truly get a handle on what that topic is like. And so it's important for maybe the teacher to reach out to some local citizens or even people across the country. You can do that via technology that have some experience in whatever this topic is and whatever the unit of study is, because these experts will allow the students to get firsthand information on what it's like to be in the field and actually apply the content that they're learning right now. And these experts don't have to be somebody that's necessarily working in that field right now. Teachers have a variety of experiences and resources at their disposal. Most of the time, there will be somebody on the faculty in the school that will have some sort of experience doing the topic that the challenge is on. So it would be encouraging to go out and have the students interview some of the teachers in the building to see if they can help them with their topic. I think that the interaction with experts is a critical aspect of the unit because it completes all of the work that the students have done and verifies that it is applicable in real life. And the challenge is really important for the students to really examine and put together all of the hard work that they've done over the course of the unit into one final building block. So in our mock unit, this is a very exciting step in the process as the students begin to gather information on their campaigns. Each person is going to be responsible for his or her portion of the campaign, as I stated earlier. And they're going to have to really rely on each other to get the communication and collaboration correctly. One of the things that's neat about this unit is the ability to reach out to a variety of people that have experience in the campaigning process. Because even local school board members have campaigned to get on the school board. Or I've found in the small town that I work on, the mayor and the aldermen are extremely accessible and willing to talk with students and give them their advice and experience that they've had. So while we may not be able to reach out to a United States representative, we have the ability to talk with people that have run campaigns on a smaller level, which would be a great experience for those students. Those people can give advice. And not to mention, if the school board members are involved, it really reflects well on what the school is trying to do and what the teacher is trying to do in the classroom to get the students real life experience. Now, to discuss some of the factors involved in doing the challenge, some people might question, well, how much time should you give a class? And that really depends on the project. For me, in this project, I would suggest giving about 100, if we're doing the mock one from government now, I would suggest about 160 minutes of class time because the kids really need to be able to dive in deep into the subject matter and really do a good job putting everything together. It's important to give them enough time, but not so much time that they start getting distracted and they start putting things off because they always have tomorrow to get it done. And to put a limit on when it's done and when it's due. Creating this deadline then puts pressure on the kids to really complete the project in a timely fashion. And also, we all know in education that you have to get to the content for the rest of the course. And so it's important not to spend a whole lot of time in class having these kids work on the projects. So, once the projects are complete and their challenges are ready to present, this presentation aspect comes into play. PBL is a great opportunity to invite members of the community in to watch the presentations. And technology actually allows this to happen seamlessly. The way you can record projects nowadays allows for a recording of the project and a recording of the presentation to be viewed at any time, which is fantastic to be able to put up on a school's website, to be put up in a forum, or even to present at a later date to show off what the kids have done and their knowledge that they have gained throughout the project. Now, telling the kids that this added audience will be put on might have them pressured into stepping up their performances and to make sure you can get the most out of them. Now, to discuss the evaluation aspect of this, you need to be able to evaluate the students on a fair basis. And it's also important for the students to understand what they're being evaluated on. One of the best ways to do this is to use a rubric, a simple rubric that will offer the students the ability to see what they're going to be graded on prior to starting the project. It also gives the ability of the teacher to have the students all on the same scale. The teacher can also use this evaluation opportunity to include input from the students on what they're going to be graded on. Creating the rubric with the students at the beginning of the unit will be very important in the students' buy-in to the grading process because they understand exactly what you're looking for from them, and it'll also be an opportunity for you to explain to them what each step means. So when the students have a say in the criteria that they're going to be graded on, their attention to detail will probably increase because they know they've chosen what they want to be graded on. Now, designing your first PBL unit, you're going to want to evaluate it in a series of steps. It's important to understand that the evaluation process under a PBL unit is going to be a little bit different than normal. Because you're working towards a culminating goal, you want to be vigilant in making sure that the content the students are learning throughout the unit is correct. And so it's important to stay on top of grading and making sure the students understand each instructional unit leading up to the challenge. Because if something doesn't make sense to them and they get it wrong during the unit, then their challenge will ultimately suffer. And also, in that regards, you want to make sure that they're participating equally in their groups. So when they're meeting in their groups leading up to the challenge, I would suggest giving out some participation points or just monitoring closely and informally that everyone is doing their part. One great suggestion that I've seen and used and saw veteran teachers use is at the end of the challenge, when everything is done, the students write a reflective piece on their role in the group, and then also their classmates' roles in the group. So that way you can understand that maybe if one student slacked off a little bit and didn't get the job done, that maybe their grade can be adjusted accordingly. And that way also, maybe one kid does not do all the work because they know that they're being held accountable for their participation. You can also use the experts that helped, if there were any, in the evaluation process. Get their feedback on how the students interacted with them, their desire to learn, and their quest for information. And all of this can be adjusted accordingly in how you would score the presentation. So that's a little bit about the culminating challenge. And that's really the exciting part of the PBL unit because it shows everything and all the content that the students knew into a very creative way that you hope the students really engaged in. So the fifth step that I want to talk about is a critical aspect of the unit that some teachers might overlook because of a lack of time. But it comes after the project's completion, and it's really a debriefing or reflection period. And this can be done right away after the student goes up, gives the presentation, and then comes back to their seat and they write a debriefing or a reflection on the process. The students should then get feedback from the teacher and experts that observe the presentation right away as well, or as quick as you can. I know time constraints are tough for teachers sometimes. And then by looking at the student's reflection plus the feedback, you can see if the student completely understood the content to the best of their abilities, or if maybe there was some confusion along the way. There are many different ways that the student could receive the feedback or give the feedback. It could be written, it could be verbal, it could be recorded, it could be videoed, it could be any sort of thing that the teacher would like to use, or that the expert that's involved would like to use. So for our mock government unit, this would probably more than likely involve a written reflection by the students on the process. This written reflection will show the teacher that they understood the content and that they what they got out of the culminating challenge. This could also be the point when you ask them to write about their participation level in the group and how their group mates performed throughout the challenge. So after this step, we're going to move on to our sixth and final step of the PBL process. And this is going to be involving the students in answering the driving question again. The question can be posted in a number of different places. It can be put up on the projector, it can be posted online for the students to answer there. It's completely up to the teacher and what they decide they would like to do. I think this would be a great opportunity for the students to write the answer to the driving question out that they come up with. It will be a great aspect of introducing and implementing the Common Core standards that involve a higher emphasis on writing in other disciplines outside of language arts. And so the students sit down and write for an extended period of time. It can only help them in the other classes. The teacher can then take the first driving question answer that the students had and compare it to the latest version and really give the idea to the teacher on how far the students have progressed from day one to now the end of the project and the end of the unit. It can be a really fun transition and should be a fun transition to see how far the students engaged in the content and how much they learned from the unit. Now that we've come to the end of the unit and all 6 steps are complete, it's important to reflect on the unit as a whole as a teacher, because we have to look and see if we ultimately achieved the objectives that we set forth at the beginning of the unit. Now, once that's done and we have all the technical aspects of PBL in place and we understand how PBL is set up and how it should work, we can move on in selecting what types of technology we want to use while implementing a PBL unit. And so I'm going to now demonstrate via screencast, so the screen's going to change a little bit here in a second, the different technologies that I have found that work great in a PBL unit. Now there are many, so these are not the only ones out there, but these are the ones that I highly suggest. So the voice is going to change here shortly, and I think you'll enjoy the video to come. Now that we have gone through the different steps and how a PBL unit would work and I've gone through a mock unit in the American government class, I'm going to take some time to now and finish up the podcast to show you the awesome technologies that can be also used and implemented into a PBL classroom. My suggestion for a classroom looking to turn into a PBL-based classroom comes in two folds. You can use computers and laptops, which are perfectly viable and offer many options to make a PBL classroom go. You can have tons of power with them, and for them specifically, I'm a Mac fan, and so I'm going to show you around the MacBook and what type of options you can have with that. You also have some internet-based programs that are both free and cost depending on where you go and what you use them for. I'm only going to show you a few of those just for the sake of time. And then the last device that we're going to look at is the iPad. Particularly a big fan of the iPad and believe in its power that it can have, and so I'm going to show you some of the apps that can be used to support a PBL classroom. So first we're going to take around the MacBook a little bit. And there are some various apps on here that Mac offers that I think are superior to other devices in editing. The first thing that I'm going to show you is iMovie, and iMovie is fantastic. I actually have a sample project that a student made in a world history class up here. This was their culminating project that they did for our Reformation unit where they talked about Martin Luther. And iMovie offers the opportunity for class to edit video clips, create moving slideshows and pictures, and really have an awesome creative experience using many digital facets. So I'm just going to show, and you can see up in the top right hand corner here, just a little bit of this that the student did.
Martin Luther was a Christian monk. He got his bachelor's degree after 1 year and his master's in 3 years. He became a monk because he almost got struck by lightning. He cried, "Help St. Anne, I will become a monk," and St. Anne saved him. He taught theology at the University of Wittenberg.
Okay, so that's just an example of a quick video that a student made using iMovie. They actually did that on the iPad and then threw it onto the computer and edited a little bit on the computer. So that's iMovie. The next app that I'm going to show, actually recording the podcast on and using it, is as you can see here, it's the PBL podcast, but it's GarageBand. And a very cool app that allows students to do many different things on it. One of the neat things that they can do is create a podcast, as I did. Then you could use it in a music class for all sorts of different stuff. The endless possibilities with GarageBand are fantastic. But if you're looking at a regular discipline class, like a history class or an English class, the podcast opportunity on GarageBand is fantastic. Okay, the next one that I'm going to show you is really awesome. This is called iBooks Author. It's a free app. You can see here I wrote a book for a previous class on here using this, so I was able to show you what it kind of looks like. It allows students to create books, and they can open them up in iBooks on their iPads, on their iPhones. They can publish them to the iBooks, through Apple if they wanted to go through that process. But they're very cool. You can create outstanding looking iBooks on here. So it'd be a great way to tie in writing into the last project. The next one I'm not going to really show, I'm just going to mention is Google Docs. Okay, Google Docs is fantastic. Allows collaboration between students. They can edit documents together. They can edit presentations together. I've used it in projects for classes, on online courses. My students have used it in class, as we're a Google Docs school. So Google Docs is excellent. Evernote, also a fantastic tool, can allow syncing of notebooks that students can use. So students can be taking notes in Evernote and have them show up in their group mates' notes. So this would be a great way to share notes through the research process and also through the learning process. Okay, another one here is Skype. Skype can be great to be used if you're working with those experts. That maybe an expert is far away and is not able to communicate with the class. They can Skype into the class. And then the last one is what I'm using to show this. It's called I Show You, and it's the ability to show and screen capture whatever is on the computer. So if you have a student that wants to do a project, that wants to maybe demonstrates how they use a program on the computer or on the internet, they could use I Show You. Okay, so those are the ones that are on the MacBook. Okay, now I'm going to show you some of the ones that are on the internet. So I'm going to open up my Safari here. The first one here that's up is called Go Animate. And I know that a class in Morrison, the school that I teach at, the technology teacher uses Go Animate videos, and they are fantastic. They create these animated short clips that have funny looking characters, as you can see down here on the bottom, and they use animated voices, and it's just really cool. The kids really get into it, and I've seen some fantastic videos come out of that class. Another one is called Prezi, and Prezi is a great presentation tool that moves around. It's interactive, and the kids really enjoy using Prezi and creating and going about doing awesome presentations on Prezi. Then you have SlideRocket, which is a way to create presentations that have basically PowerPoints that have audio behind them, and you can get really fancy and technical with them. It does cost money, so that is a little bit of a drawback, but SlideRocket presentations can be beautiful and very moving, so if your school could afford it, it would be very good. So those are just 3 on the internet that I would suggest that teachers can use and really have a great time doing. Okay, so now that I've shown you what the MacBook can do and what some of the internet options are for PBL and the culminating challenge, I'm going to show you a little bit more technologically inverse stuff here. I'm going to show you the iPad and some of the stuff that the iPad has to offer, because I'm a big fan of the iPad. Love teaching with it. My students love creating with it, and it allows for fantastic works to be done on it. So I'm going to show you what can be done on the iPad using another great app that teachers should use if they're trying to implement a PBL process or a PBL project, and it's called Reflector. And Reflector is an app that you download. It's $14.99, but it's completely worth it because it wirelessly allows you to sync or to show whatever's on your iPad onto your computer, and then you can use it to hook up to a projector if you wanted to. So I'm going to click on my mirroring here, and there it is. So that is my iPad screen. and it's really great. So now if my computer was hooked up to a projector, my students could see whatever's on my iPad. It really allows the teacher to fully utilize the iPad and the device in the classroom. So I'm just going to go over a couple of the apps here that can be used on the iPad for teaching or for PBL purposes. The first one's the camera that you can see down in the right hand corner there. And the camera seems basic and simple, but the students really have the ability to do fantastic things with the camera, including take still photos of them doing work or of things that they see while they're out working. But then they also use the movie camera aspect of it and take video clips. And those video clips can be used in the culminating challenge. So the camera is really a great fan favorite of the iPad, and it allows the students to get absolutely creative when they're doing their projects. So I'm going to go over now and I'm going to show you some of the different applications here that can be used with the iPad and PBL. The first one is Keynote, and Keynote is a basic PowerPoint app that allows the students to create PowerPoints. They show them, then they can use the iPad to then show the PowerPoint to the class if they wanted to. So pretty basic there. Okay. The next one over is iMovie. And iMovie takes those video clips that the students can use or record on the iPad. They can then import them into iMovie, and then they have the ability to edit the video clip right in iMovie on their iPad. So I showed you iMovie on the computer. It's more technical and has more features than the iPad version, but if you don't have a laptop available and you cannot sync the video over to the laptop, iMovie on the iPad is perfectly fine. It works great and allows for fantastic creations and works. The next one over is AudioNote, and AudioNote is pretty neat and can be used to support PBL. I don't think it's really an app that could use for the final culminating project, but it's a great note-taking app. So if a student were sitting down with a person in their field, an expert, they could use AudioNote to record the conversation and then also take physical notes as they're recording to offer the ability to then use what the conversation was with the expert later on as they're doing their project. Sonic Pics is a very cool app. It's a picture slideshow app. It allows students to import pictures both that they have taken themselves or that they found and saved from the internet to their camera roll. They then use the pictures and do a voiceover recording over top of the pictures. So this is a great one for a culminating challenge if the topic involved a lot of visual effects, so that students could go out, find many pictures from the internet on their topic, and then record over top of what those pictures were and use all of their content knowledge to support that. The next app is called Book Creator, and Book Creator is one of my all-time favorites because it takes a ton of different skills for students to do, and it can involve so much creativity, and it uses so many traditional methods to get the point across, but yet it supports project-based learning to a tremendous level. And the students actually in this, it's similar to iBooks Author because the students will create a book, but they do it on the iPad, and this is one that's not as technical as iBooks Author is on the MacBook, but it is really cool and the kids really enjoy using it. So I'm going to demonstrate this one a little bit because I think it's so cool. So I'm going to open up a new book here, and I'm just going to add some text to show you what can happen at the end here. So I added my text box. Okay, I put it down here. Now I can go on and it can create multiple pages in this, but for purposes only, I'm going to open it in iBooks, and that's the really cool part. The kids get a kick out of this because they see it in the library next to other books. And so I'm going to open it up here, and boom, now I have a new book, and it swipes pages just like you would if you were to download a book from the iBooks library. And so it's very cool. So I'm going to go back out of this. So Book Creator is fantastic. It allows a lot of writing. It allows a lot of creativity. You can do endless things with it. You can add pictures in there. You can add sound. You can have them record themselves talking. And so ultimately the presentation that could come out of a book like this, the possibilities are endless. You could have, instead of having them make a paper brochure that could have been a part of a project before, they could create a brochure in Book Creator and submit that to the teacher. They can email it in a PDF file, and the teacher could then take it and distribute it amongst all of the people in the area. Great idea for this one, if we're looking back to the government class, is if they do a local unit on local government. they could create a brochure for the town that they live in and then email it to the teacher. The teacher could then distribute it to all the members of the local community if they wanted to, or they could distribute it via email to all the members of the town council. So, I mean, it could really be a great opportunity for the kids to show off what they do in class. So Book Creator is awesome because of the written element that comes into play. So you still are developing that written skill, but also establishing the creativity and the technology base with it. A couple more here. You see SlideRocket, I talked about that earlier. This is just the mobile app. Unfortunately, SlideRocket doesn't allow you to edit the presentations on the iPad. You have to do all the editing on the internet, but you can view the presentations via the iPad. So if a student were to create it on the internet, the teacher could then open it up in SlideRocket on the iPad device, or even the student could. Those are some of the basic apps that students can use on the iPad. So I'm going to wrap up the PBL podcast here by saying that a lot of these apps are fantastic for teachers to use, and the possibilities to use technology with project-based learning are endless. I've only scratched the surface of it, because there's so many experts out there, and there's so many new apps coming out, and there's so many new websites coming out, and there's so many new things coming out. It's hard to keep up with everything. But the point is that technology and PBL go hand in hand together, and that if you can add a technology aspect into the culminating challenge and have the students really use those 21st century skills of collaboration, communication, and creativity, their projects are going to come to life. And then if you use technology and have them be able to share their presentations with people and with experts and with the community, their mindset and their positivity can only grow, and their knowledge of the content can only grow. And so I'd like to thank you for listening tonight and to the podcast here, because it's been a lot of fun to make. I've learned a lot, and I hope you have too. And so I'd like to again thank you, and now I'm going to sign off.